Good morning. Welcome. Do I look confused? That's good. So before I begin a Dharma talk, I'd like to read some of this because the memory is slippery. So I imagine we're all pretty tired of all the news that's coming across, even though we, at least in my case, I want to listen to what's happening in the world. I want to hear what the newscasters have to say and so on. It gets pretty tiring. Constant conversation about just things that just seem ridiculous. But it's the way it's done, I guess, in politics. So tired of that. Well, I have some really great news, which to me is very, very important. I can't say how important it is, and I don't very often say that, other than train your mind. This is important because it is about a community. So on October 1st, we will launch a $1 million capital campaign to build a community mindfulness center on Sokukoji's campus. Community Mindfulness Center will be a place where people can train their minds to discover what has been called by Trungpa Rinpoche and others just basic goodness. I prefer basic sanity, because the sanity is already the case. The goodness is already the case. But in the world, because of the nerve endings, because we don't like suffering, we try to cover it up with this or that. Rarely do we run into a situation where you can actually receive this. This is what this center is about. So people, not Buddhists, I don't care if they ever come into a monastery or even hear the Buddhist teaching. Might be good, might be helpful, but that is up to them, not up to you or me. We're not here to advertise anything. However, in 1950s, this little city of 40, 50,000 had 25 to 30 factories here. I worked in a couple of them. I worked in Post Cereals for a while. I worked at Eaton Corporation, Automotive and Components Division. Everybody was paid pretty well, had good hospitalization, was taken care of, had good retirement. And a lot of people, including my mother and stepfather, who worked at Kellogg's, did fairly well. They were able to live and pay their bills and not be freaked out about what's going to happen next. These days are gone. Lucky to get a job at McDonald's here. So this town, not that every town, not that Lansing, Michigan, or Erie, Pennsylvania, or any other place doesn't need some kind of a mindfulness center. I feel that that's true. That's, if you want to call it a vision, I don't know. I'm not looking at anything else. I'm just saying we need in our world, we need to be able to have a place where just anybody, the crazy person that lives next door to us here, could actually entertain the idea of coming in and sitting down and also going to their therapist, also drinking Budweiser on the weekend, anything to kind of lighten the whatever. give them the opportunity and the instruction, just like Senchu is going to be doing on Tuesday over at the yoga studio, which is not the community mindfulness center. It's a yoga studio, but it'll do for a while. People can come in and learn how to just sit still and watch the movement of the mind. This has to be done a lot, as you know. Those of you who are here are all, most of you are pretty seasoned meditators. So we've been working pretty hard at this for a long time. This is the public part is starting up to try to generate interest in this. I've talked to people personally. We've actually hired a ISU, a fundraiser, who's also a Buddhist, someone who is a professional with this, has been doing a wonderful job. More information will be coming out next week on this, so on October 1st. And I'll be talking a little bit more about this. By the way, there are only, right now in the 2000s, there are only 5 factories, and I don't even know what they are. That's how big they are. All we have here is Kellogg Foundation. Kellogg Foundation, even though it's right here in Battle Creek, is not going to help us. I'm not saying they wouldn't, but it would probably take a lot of work to get them to be interested in us because they don't do bricks and mortar. They do programs. Okay, well, you have a certain way you want to do it, then that's up to them. It's their money. Big foundation, though. Very, very wealthy. So I'll have more to say about that later. Is there anything else I should cover, if you think? Okay, thank you, Mondo. So since I'm reading that, I think I will maybe read a little bit about the consideration I have about the topic of the Dharma talk. The title of it is Stop Concluding, which of course you can't do. We can't stop it. Can't stop, but conclude this or say, that shouldn't happen. This should, I need to go there. I need to go there. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about coming up with an idea, a solution in a very mundane way, but interpretation, especially about your own life or thought patterns. What's being said is just receive all of this without comment. And that's also noticing how you can't help but comment. It's always about awareness. You can always return to that. If you're ever on the cushion or walking down the hallway or in your car or looking for your car in the parking lot, reflect on what this is fundamentally. Not to get rid of your thoughts, your ideas, your concepts, your conclusions, but be aware of those. Be aware that there's an activity in the mind stream that's trying to protect you from seeing your true nature. Because if you see your true nature, your thoughts will come to a halt conditionally. Because then you're no longer fighting with pratitya samutpada. You're no longer fighting with the natural organization of relative truth, this world. But what are you doing? You're not doing much. You're just part of it. You'll notice that sometimes you dance, sometimes you sit out a couple of dances, sometimes you move around, but the conclusion area that is meant to protect you just starts to wear out because it is no longer encouraged by aggression and no longer encouraged by action or thinking or processing or analyzing or strategizing, which promotes that part of the mind we call the ego. Not wrong, it's just circular and very, very confusing and can cause incredible pain for yourself and for, of course, those in your milieu. As I'm saying here, don't misunderstand. This doesn't mean you won't have very simple conclusions all day long. It's when the concluding is meant to keep you from seeing the radical ultimate truth. Stop meddling with everything, or at the very minimum, be aware that you're interpreting meddling. If you don't want to practice, then don't practice. If you want to practice, then go ahead and practice. Just don't add all of your stupid, inane commentary to it. You're not practicing, you're not practicing. If you haven't noticed, all I ask is CCC, communicate, let me know you won't be here today. No one comes and knocks on your door and say, you should be at the monastery. just because you live here. No, it's situational. Some people can come. Maybe tomorrow you don't feel so good, stay home. Maybe for a week you don't feel so good, stay home. There are people here doing that. I'm sure you've noticed. I'm sure that generates a little bit of discursive thought in your mind stream when you see that you're in here practicing really hard and other people are just wandering around gossiping in the kitchen. Have you noticed? Shake your head, yes. You haven't shook your head yes yet. Okay. I saw everybody do it, but choo-choo. If something needs concluding, it will conclude itself and be obvious all by itself. You don't have to talk to yourself about it or to anyone else. So that's enough reading. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, please do this with your awareness. And it's difficult to do that with your awareness if you don't know the difference between awareness and the thinking process. If you are deluded by the nature of consciousness, if you think there is a person who is a thinker and a person who is a concluder, or a person who, if you think that, then that's the very nature of it. But that makes sense to ego because it can use that as the mechanism, the energy, and the enculturation in the ego that this has to be protected because this is threatened. It's not threatened. If you think it's threatened, then you continue to live your life through some kind of crazy paranoia, maybe so personalized that even a therapist wouldn't necessarily think you were paranoid because you make so much sense, because you're so damned intelligent. You're able to actually defend your neurosis with extreme logic, rationality, explaining why you are doing this way. And the person maybe trying to help you might be swayed by that because they too may be going in their own particular circularity. You don't have to do that. Stop concluding. Just observe. There may be a conclusion, a kind of conclusion, but the ultimate conclusion is to see what this is, and it will not be a conclusion because there isn't anything left to conclude. There isn't anything left that can conclude, because the fundamental nature of this is not separate from anything. Has to be seen, as you've heard me say a couple dozen times. I'd like to have some questions, or I can keep rambling on. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, what does it look like for something to conclude itself in the mind stream?
It's just obvious. It's obvious that this is the case, or this was the case, and then it changes to something else. But there's no one pushing it. There's no one concerned about outcomes, because the understanding has gone so deeply that you actually realize that the past and the future are illusions. You can't think your way into that, although there are teachers and teachings that talk about it so conceptually that if you read it, you start to really consider if there is a before and an after, because the intellectual force is so powerful. But that intellectual force isn't just a force that's coming out of a direct perception of the nature of what this is. This is empty of other. This is empty of a self and empty of anything else. And it's full of whatever it's full of, sometimes called Buddha nature or awakened truth. More.
Sokuzan, when you say it's obvious, it's not obvious to me. So how does the passion, aggression, and ignorance obscure that obvious?
So I'll use your passion, aggression, ignorance, which is basic teaching of Buddhism, something you've been studying for years. We all have. The passion part is anything that's arising, this person sitting in front of you, this computer screen, that camera, anything you're seeing and anything I'm seeing, people sitting in front of me, men and women sitting here in black robes, and banners hanging in the Zendo. It's just that. If you do anything with it, anything, if you interpret it, if you analyze it, can do any kind of, do anything with it other than just receive it, just see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, think it, feel it. And the thinking, the feeling, that's the difficult area, because that's the area where the ego may not be too tied up with the taste buds, but the ego is extremely tied up with your emotions and thoughts and feelings. And if that has not been seen as being unreal, then it will have complete purchase on anything that happens in the mind stream and the consciousness. And when I say purchase, I mean it just has a hold of it. It can control that as an other, when actually it's not an other. That's the illusion part. It looks like that. This is why the sitting practice of meditation, awareness, training helps you to train your mind to watch what goes in the mind stream without accepting, rejecting, or shutting down the three poisons again. You can actually do that in this room. You can do it right now as we're speaking. More about it if you have it. Let's go further into that.
Sokuzan, if something is concluding itself, is there action arising out of? Is there action arising?
You'll ask me what you want to know, because you feel like you're holding back something. Are you doing something?
Sokuzan, if there's any action coming from or out of me, is that?
Yes. Yes, that's yes. Yes, you may be slamming your fist on the table. There's nothing to fix. This is why it's so astonishingly difficult, because nothing has to occur. It's the truth is right here, no matter what you say or do about it, no matter how much you torture others or torture yourself or take whole armies to war and kill other people. I'm not saying you, but anybody does that. That doesn't mean that this isn't painful and isn't consequential, but it's an illusion. And if you think it's real, then you will fight with that. You'll go to war, you'll go to peace, you'll take positions on everything. You'll accuse others who are just at the mercy of dependent origination, which they cannot see. They're just trying to be happy too. As Tai Situ once said in a talk I attended at Sheridan House in Chicago in the late 1970s, no one wants to be suffered. Never forgot that. But it's everywhere, and it's going to keep going. It's rampant. This is why the idea of saying, well, why don't we just have a building where not the monastery? This is different. The fancy way of saying it, this is heavy lifting over here. People sitting sometimes all day long. The whole month of February, the last 2 years, has been dedicated to nothing but chicken taza for the whole 28 or 29 days. We're going to do it again this year. Sokuzan's going into retreat in December for a couple of weeks. Then he's going out to California to go to an intensive training seminar in January at Green Gulch. And then he's going to come back here and sit for another month. I think you should sit more. There are people, by the way, Sokuzan, people are saying yes. Just sit more.
They're not wrong.
Good response. Amazing. So the idea is to practice this. I don't know of anything else that we can do as an actual thing that you do is to do nothing. It's like doing nothing. You're simulating just holding still, because the body and mind are not two separate things. But since we can shuffle the body, move this way, move that way, that is thoughts moving. That's not just a body. When you do that, the clarity around the illusion is diminished. And the actuality of as they say, the proof is in the pudding. And when the pudding is moving around, it's pudding. It's there. So you're feeling it. It's there. But if you hold still, that's an illusion. There is no pudding. Don't believe me. You hear me say this? So don't believe what I'm saying. That's more like somebody knows more than you do. No, this is a different kind of knowledge. It's more like no knowledge, but just pure attention, pure, bare attention to what this is. You can see this. I want you to see this. And I will, as long as you give me permission, I will look at you, I'll receive you where you're at. And you'll find that I treat you completely differently than I treat everyone else. And I might be giving you a hell of a hard time. And someone else, I might be just practically smooching with them. It won't be you. Maybe with your son. I like him. He's only 2. He's a smoocher. More?
Sokuzan, speaking of Xiao Huang or Elia, when there are behaviors that are arising out of aggression, what does it look like to not conclude and to be aware of that situation?
It sounds like you're probably doing it, but you're asking a question, so it probably is difficult to watch a 2-year-old throw tantrums. Just watch them. Don't have to do anything. Don't interfere with what he needs to see by changing what he needs to see, by scolding him, by punishing him. Do not meddle with anyone. Protect him from danger, keep him away from broken glass. Don't hand him broken glass so he can learn about cutting himself. That's another kind of idealism that goes with some parenting. Don't do anything. And certainly if, no, you, I know what I'm going to say.
How do I work with your teaching in a society that thinks that we have to address or change?
That's why you're a monk. That's why you're in a monastery. That's why I want to see this be a family monastery. I don't know if there ever has been one. If I have anything to say about it, there will be one here. And it can wear out, it can do whatever it needs to do. We have several children here right now, yours being the Laughing Phoenix that I just recently named. Smiling, no, Laughing Phoenix. Smiling Phoenix, that's Shoho's name. Shoho couldn't quite break into laughter, but he smiled a lot. But your son starts out laughing.
Sokuzan, how do I meet society that wants to modify?
Just if it's showing up in terms of your family or your parents or grandparent or whatever shows up, just listen, consider it, be respectful, listen to what we're saying. Do not argue with them. Try to don't participate in juvenile discussions about something that people think they're sophisticated and mature. Don't participate, but don't ignore. So listen, participate. Yes, I kind of see what you're saying there. And if they put you on the spot, well, do you agree with it? Well, not exactly. I don't exactly agree. But I'm not saying repeat what I say. I mean, you have to be connecting with what I'm saying, which I think you are. You wouldn't be sitting here. Be very respectful. That young man is, like everyone here, is coming into this world with just countless ages of karma behind them. There are no individuals. If you think there are, then you'll think this is your life and this was your high school and this was your first boyfriend or girlfriend and this is your test scores and this and this and this, and trying to find some structure to give you an identity that you can count on so that you can obey society. So a whole bunch of white people can control you. When I say white people, mainly white men for centuries, although that's starting to change. And is it wrong? No, it's just dependently religion. No one's to blame for any of this. No one's to blame for a landslide. It's just gravity. So, yes, go ahead.
Sokuzan. So in terms of me interacting with Elia or Xiao Huang, whenever he gets upset, he might throw something like his bike. And tendency to respond to that is to take that away so that he can't continue to throw it.
That might be, it's a pretty soft approach to it. You're just taking away his weapons. So I don't see anything wrong with that, but no follow-up of scolding and yelling and intimidating him so that his ego, which is very tiny right now, starts to puff up to protect himself. So he feels threatened. He can't be who he is. he knows he's not, he has no say-so about it. He knows that. You think you have say-so. So he's actually, in one sense, it's called innocence. He's more mature than you are. But allow him to be who he is. It doesn't mean allowing him to smash the windows out of the house. Or, to throw horrible tantrums. It's so situational, I can't give you a standard for it, but I'm saying be very respectful to his confusion. Just know that he's got really intense negative emotions that are rising, and they don't have a source. You could say, well, they must be coming from that lifetime in the 14th century when he was what do they call those? You don't know. What do they call them?
Bubble gum.
Bubble gums. Back in the 14th century. No, not the 14th century. Impossible. So I am trying to point to is the impossibility of knowing what we can come up with words or ideas. People can do past life investigations or look at your astrology, your horoscope, or anything and find this, or your tarot cards, or your or just psychoanalysis, or what's the other one? EMDR, is that the one where you actually go in and kind of crack with quite a bit of violence to go in and crack into somebody's memory area to find out terrible things that happened in a past life or in a past time when they were 4 years old. I'm not so sure I'm in favor of going into it that way. What I'm in favor of is training. Just see clearly. And if you need to see those kind of incidents, you'll see them. The ones that are going in and deliberately going in because they're looking for results. Meditation is not looking for results. If you don't understand that, here I am, ask me about it, or here anybody is. So you do not have to train him to act better, be better. Let him do that himself. He's a brilliant young person. It's already the case. And just protect him from danger as he thrashes around and tries to establish his territory as king of the universe. As far as I'm concerned, he is. Look at him. He's a laughing phoenix. Further questions? Any questions on Zoom? You follow what I'm saying, what I'm asking about here? You what I'm saying? Yes.
Junju bowing. The other day you said the teaching of go with the intention and don't be concerned with the outcome
Yes.
doesn't just apply to the spiritual path, it also applies to our relative lives.
Yes.
How can that be the case when we have a relative situation to maintain, like having a house in order to have a place to practice?
Yes. It's easier if you do it that way, because then it's obvious you have to take out the garbage. You don't sit back and say, not happening. No, it's obvious you have to do it. It's obvious you need to take the garbage out. But it's a relative situation. It does not take all this incredible brain work or blaming or consideration or analysis to figure out how to run a household. Very simple, ordinary stuff. But it's very easy to get the ego considerations, the hope and fear, and the fear that you're not being respected, or somebody thinks you're not respecting them, and turns domestic stuff into just warfare. Without money training, there's probably no way to work with that I know of. I'm not saying you can't, but you can't work with it in some way. But it needs to be done on the cushion. You need to sharpen the blade before you start chopping vegetables. There needs to be some kind of just simple watching what moves, mind training, spiritual path. So that when this physical form that looks so real and authentic and doesn't look like an illusion works in areas that are also part of the illusion, but don't look like the illusion because it has a past and a future, a right and a wrong, a fragrant and a smelly. They have all those polarities happening everywhere. And you could say navigate might not be a good word because it sounds like somebody's doing that. The clarity around that comes from fundamental respect for who you are, what this consciousness is, instead of fighting with yourself, trying to improve and trying to be somebody that some better person. This is just, it's just circular and it's taught everywhere. Am I against it? No, I'm saying maybe that's the way you need to. Maybe there's people that need to learn that way. What I'm saying is you can do it with your awareness. And when you do it with your awareness, you'll see that the mundane path and the spiritual path are not two separate things. But you can't do it with the mundane path. It has to be done with the spiritual path so that your everyday life becomes the spiritual path. More if you have it.
How do I include that teaching when I am concerned with outcomes?
Just look at it. Just be aware that you're concerned with outcomes. If you do that without pushing it away, if you do that without any addition to it, like even saying, I can't help but be concerned with outcomes, that's extra. You're actually looking at a box, and as soon as you see what it is, it smells too much, and you just cover it up. I am concerned with outcomes. You just lock down on it. It's such a simple elaboration that happens in the mind stream. The only way I know of that you can begin to see through that is to watch the way you do that on the cushion, and slowly over time, stop pushing. Slowly over time, stop pulling. There's aggression and passion, and they're very subtle. It isn't just hitting something, and it isn't just having a strong feeling about something. It's the actual activity of pushing, pulling, and shutting down that come out of that happened in the mind stream or at the end of your hand. Just continue. More if you have it.
It seems like my mundane life is full of tiny adjustments, trying to figure out how to wake up earlier, how to get in a workout or change my diet.
What's your question?
How can I include the teaching of don't adjust when I'm constantly making adjustments?
Just watch the adjustments without any pushing it away, without any validating it. So there's the aggression and the passion, and without turning away. And there's more subtle ways than the one I'm about to express, but the pushing away is the difficult one. But it's like, oh, that's not going to work. I'm just not going to think about that anymore. Ignorance. So just look at it. Just like you would treat your mind like a little child who's suffering and is painful, like the laughing phoenix. Just when you see your mind doing what Elia or Shawan is doing, just have some compassion. When I say have some compassion, that's a fancy phrase that I rarely use. But you could, what is that? Just put what's happening with him. Put what's happening with your mind before your consideration in the mind that is more about ego, about wanting to change it, wanting to control it, wanting to have it be better. Be respectful for what is arising from centuries ago, which is called this woman and this consciousness that was named Bailey, that I changed your name to. What did I call you? Yunshin. What does that mean?
Pure appearance.
Pure appearance. It's just pure appearance. There's nothing extra. There's nothing on it. There's nothing in it. There's nothing outside of it. And there's nothing about it. It's just pure, and it appears, and it is what? An illusion. I could go on and on about this, but maybe it encourages you. Maybe you think, well, maybe I could look at all this solid stuff and see that it's unreal. Well, that's what that's about. But you have to do it. I'm not very convincing. I might just look outlandish. Somebody might want to just say, who wants to listen to that stuff anymore? That's all he ever says is everything's an illusion. But I am offering you the opportunity through encouraging you. That's why we built this monastery, because I know how hard this is. I know how many years I spent with no monastery, and seeing that this is going to be done by, if I'm going to be able to help anybody, I'm going to need to actually create something where people can enter the spiritual path fully, completely, become ordained. Do this so that you have so many things that you've done to encourage it. It's pretty hard to go another direction, but it still can be done. That doesn't mean everybody has to be monks or live in a monastery. No, I have no advertisement for that. I would say if you can avoid this, avoid it. Go do something else. said that a few times. But if you can't, then if this makes some sense to you, I will help you, whether you come here or not. I talk to people that I've never met face to face, maybe never will. Not my concern.
Should I be making all of those mundane adjustments?
You should be observing them. If you observe that you're doing that, some of them might ramp up and become stronger because you're no longer pushing it. You're no longer pulling on it or explaining it or justifying it or validating or blaming anybody, including yourself. You're just watching it. And some of that fabric that looks so smooth starts to get more and more wrinkled over the mind stream. Observe that. Give everything your attention. Be as generous as you can to the mind stream, no matter how wrinkled and ugly and difficult it looks. Realize your true nature, pure appearance. You can do that. I'm here to push you, crowd you, as long as you let me. You talk to other people who are students of mine, you'll see that they're not having an easy time with it necessarily. Maybe some are, but time's running out. You see what I'm saying a little bit? You see how enthusiastic I am and how energetic I am about that, not getting you to obey me so much as just saying, because you can see this. You can see this. You've been here, you're living a little bit distance away, but you come here often. As does Yin Long. You both come here quite a bit, considering that you're not living in the monastery complex per se. But all of those little wrinkles that are going around, just observe them. Don't improve. It's a different kind of way of working with the life. Even Atisha's 7 points of mind training and other teachings talk about ways to improve, ways to not have this or not have that, and do this or do that. I'm not against any of that. If some of that makes sense to you and seems to you resonate with it, then by all means use that. I think there's 59 slogans in there. I think I agree with about 4 of them. But I don't disagree with the other ones. I just would leave that up to the causes and conditions that are arising with you. If you came to me and said, I really want to do Tonglen practice, I would say, well, how is that working for you? Are you already doing it? Say, yes, I'm. If you said, yes, I'm doing that. And I say, how's that showing up? How do you feel about that? Then we would talk about it. But I wouldn't take that away from you. I just don't teach it directly because I've said before, and I'm not going to go into detail about it, but I don't think it's a good blanket practice. I think it's good to teach individually, but if you teach it in a blanket way, everybody gets Tonglen, everybody does. And I don't care what Shanti Deva said. I don't care what Trungpa said or anybody else. I'm saying I'm looking at it. I'm teaching out of what I'm looking at. When I meet you, I'm looking at you. When I meet you, I'm looking at you. I'm not looking at who you think you are, although I'm seeing that too, but I'm seeing who you are, who you actually are. And I don't have any proof other than if you were to go that direction. I think that can be dangerous for some people's consciousness because of the way they're wired. They're not really ready to receive a bunch of negativity because they already have enough of their own.
On divine, who do you see that we actually are?
Awake. A Buddha, awakened one, the awakened one, or the awakened, there's no one. There's no other, just awake. It's just awakening showing up, consciousness showing up as human form, as leaves. We talked about those leaves out there this morning. I said, look at these little leaves. All by itself, and countless leaves. There's just one little leaf right there. A complete illusion of independence. I'm a little leaf on the edge of with hundreds of other little leaves. It's both that and everything, not separate. It's consciousness. If you see it, you don't need anybody to come along. Pat you on his back. You see it. You know it. And that's when wisdom and compassion are not two separate things. Nor are they the same. More?
No bowing. When you say stop concluding or don't adjust, Are you saying basically to hold our seat and just receive what shows up instead of and like create suspicion about our thinking process?
Or if the suspicion comes up, then just observe always back up a quarter of an inch and just look at that, back up a quarter of an inch. Anytime you have concepts show up, just step back a little bit rather than try to stop the concept, add to the concept, do anything with it. Just don't get rid of it. It's just part of dependent origination. But it's when consciousness is stuck to the concept that we can't do anything with it. But if you give it a little bit of space, which is not really yours to give particularly, but it's like my way of saying it is just see that you're enamored of your concepts and your ideas, and they're just extra. They just cloud the whole thing. You can do that. You can especially do that if you practice a lot of sitting meditation, shikantaza, zazen, mindfulness practice also leads in that direction more.
What about you? Would you then say that go ahead and conclude?
Yes.
Just observe it.
Yes, I would. When I say don't conclude, as you've heard me say many times, I know you can't stop doing that. I'm doing it all day long. But if you put some tension on that and endeavor to not conclude, to just watch what shows up without particularly adding a bunch of chemicals to it, a bunch of ideas about should, shouldn't, should do that, shouldn't, that's good, that's bad. Put a little tension there, then you'll see that which continues to conclude. Then you'll see that some things need to function as if they were concluding, because we're in an illusion, and so that illusion is going to continue to function. It doesn't necessarily become everything is like smoke and we can walk through walls. It's not that kind of an illusion, although that's what a dream is like.
Wonderful, you tell us that everything is an illusion, and yet we're still on the path looking to see what this is.
Yes.
Is what this is an illusion?
What it is neither an illusion nor is it not an illusion. It's beyond the particularity. It's called non-dual. The fancy words have been around since way back, probably before the Upanishads, but before the time of the Buddha. There have been beings who understood this and began to teach it or talk about it. It won't be a fancy experience. You can have lots of whoop-de-doo insight. Things happen, but they don't last. They fade. Experience fades. Insight, or rather than use that word, awareness of what this is doesn't fade. It can't fade because has no existential status as something. Everywhere you look, that's it. It's not a conclusion. It will not protect any aspect of the ego that is still extant or that is still operating, some kind of self-centeredness that is still running around looking for proof or results or protection. That may happen.
Milka bowing, do we need to stop concluding that we are somebody?
Just be aware that you're doing that. So when I say stop concluding, that's what I'm saying, stop it. But we can't really stop. We'll probably continue. But if you're more aware that you're clamping down on this or this, the extreme situation is like an opinion based on a certain amount of relative truth. It's probably pretty strong. So it's about being aware of that rather than changing it, or anything you do to change anything, cover anything up, modify anything, will be used by that part of the consciousness we call the seventh, or the klesha mind, the ego mind, the paranoid part of the mind, the part that's protecting some part of consciousness that is aligned with this body mind complex we call me. Some kind of protection. That's where these emotions tumble around and we get worried, we get paranoid. So it's about observing. Yes.
You know, Kabawing, earlier you said you conclude all day long. You
Yes.
conclude all day long. Do you do anything with that? Kabawing?
I'm aware that I'm concluding. And sometimes it really gets a hold of me. Not to go into specifics about my life, but my karma is not easy. I don't imagine anybody's karma in here is very easy. But the particular chemistry that shows up here, the downside is it's difficult, really difficult and challenging and frustrating and so on since I was very young, since I was born. The upside is without that, I would not have run into the Dharma. I would be somewhere being happy and being successful relatively, while still facing what? Sickness, aging, and death. Now I'm still facing sickness, aging, and death, but it's a little bit different than it would have been had there been no practice of the Buddha's Dharma.
You know, Kabawing, if we don't conclude or see how we're concluding, how does that help us with death?
It helps us see that death is not a conclusion. It just got when everyone smiles a little bit. Well, maybe not everyone, but part of that is saying, why wouldn't? Well, that's a conclusion. Of course, it is. It concludes life. No, it does not. It does not. You cannot conclude. I'm not saying the body doesn't come to an end, but all this is showing you is that you think you're the body. This doesn't mean that if someone really close to you that you love passes away and you no longer see them and you see their corpse, doesn't mean that is extremely painful, heartbreaking to see someone you care about, you're attached to. That's all going to continue to happen. I don't care how enlightened you are. Those kind of, that part of the illusion is so powerful. It's like Marpa said centuries ago when with some of his students were there. I don't know which student it was, Richungpa or someone back there said his son, Marpa's son passed away. Do you remember that story? So, and Marpa's all upset. He says, I thought you said everything was illusion. This is this is an extreme illusion, something of some kind of a, do you remember the word that was used there, the translation of it? Extreme. But it was something like that, as if that's some kind of excuse. Oh, it's an extreme illusion. No. Okay. So it's not about getting rid of that and suddenly be above, because that's just more ego. You do not have to be above this. You can be the suffering one. This is what the Buddha suffered. That's how he knew about this. The Buddha suffered. Life is suffering. How did he know? Suffered. Did he get rid of the suffering? No. Did he get rid of his ego? No. Nothing to get rid of. You just need to see that this is from ego to ego. A self and other. This is an illusion. Yes, sir.
Chokudao bowing. How do I work with receiving unsolicited advice that's propped up by psychology and like societal conditioning and all of that?
Come to shut up. How's that work?
Chokudao bowing. That didn't work.
Okay, well, you tried that one. Let's see. Okay, number 2. Let's see. You've heard me say this, and you and I have talked about this, George. You just listen to the tone. If someone's in front of you, take in everything that's being presented, not just the lingo of what they're saying, but watch their body language, not interpret it, how they're moving their hands or how their stance changes when a certain phrase comes up. Not that you're using that to go into some kind of analysis or psychology about it, but if you're really on receive from whatever, you don't have to necessarily agree, but if you're really receiving it, I mean, genuinely receiving it, that really seems to help the whole dynamic. I'm not saying it will soften them up and they may come back tomorrow and say, it looked like you really were considering what I was saying. And you can come back and say, I really was. I really have thought, I'm still thinking about that. I'm reflecting on the advice you gave and said, well, aren't you going to do something about it? So I might. You can, all you're doing is what is it for karma? You're pacifying. Pacify forever. And then at some point you may have to enrich. You may have to fluff it up somehow. And at some point to use those 4 karmas, you may have to magnetize or pull the energy into your area or magnetize. And then the other one is to destroy. And who knows how that can show up so many ways, including just walk away and don't talk to them again. And you can actually end that by being abrupt. I mean, if somebody is really, it's not good for them to just hold forth and give you a bunch of stupid advice. So you could, one more.
Choke it out bowing.
I meant one more over here.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Interesting how that worked.
Would you like me to speak?
No. What was I gonna say?
One thing.
Huh? That one thing. Stealing my lines. No, please go ahead.
Choke it out bowing. The destroying one makes a lot of sense. And I've used that many times. There's situations where I think you know what I'm talking about. There's someone I cannot get away from.
I do.
And this comes up, actually multiple people where you can't cut that connection. And you
Yeah.
actually do have, you're forced to work with this person. It could be a job or a partner, a child.
Can be.
So how does destroying look in that situation?
It could work, but when I say skillful, I'm not saying a lot of thinking about it, but I'm saying being with that person and what it is they're trying to do and looking at being able to see, because you're clear about your own motivation for running away or running towards or hiding out. You could get very clear about the other person's and try to see what the chemistry is, but behind why they're even trying to push on you, and see if you can address that area. And usually it shows up in terms of one of the four karmas. And the kind of connection could be, and this is not an advice, this is not a standard, this is not something you should ever do. But you could actually come back if it's getting really rugged and the person won't work with you any other way. You basically can tell them to fuck off. You could, might not use, I probably shouldn't be using that word here, but you could end it like just you can be the person. That person's got all this resentment and all this things that are showing up. This is for you specifically. I'm not giving this as a general advice, but I know what the person you're talking about there, the situation. And I would say you could just cut it that way, and then they can start to actually have a reason to blame you instead of the artificiality that are using to blame you. That way then the chemistry of the situation changes into you're actually the person that you actually said this. And now I almost said she. I meant he, of course. But then that you follow a little bit what I'm saying, and you're actually playing chess, which you're actually pretty good at. So you're actually doing that because it's just about working with whatever situation comes up. There's no end to this illusion. It just goes on and on. And in that way, I would say it this way, you would actually be having some compassion for that person, because you've done this, you've done that, and you get frustrated by trying to work with it in a reasonable, uplifted, sane conversation, or however you want to say it. It's not working, so you just about have to go in the proverbial battlefield, because that's where they're at, and whether you know it or not, you're there too. And not a good idea to be a weakling in a battlefield. You follow that a little bit? This is what that four karmas is about. It's not, you might have to do that. Anything else? Thank you for that question. That actually helps me understand more what you're dealing with. Jen,
Bowing.
I was just looking at your Roxu and kind of reviewing the name I gave you, and I'm wondering if I should continue to call you that name, or I haven't decided. Should I continue to? Is that Roxu okay to keep that around, that you'll come here one of these days?
I hope to come soon.
Okay, good. Okay.
That name.
No promises, just sometime in the next couple of years.
Month, I'm hoping.
Okay. Go ahead.
Bowing. I feel like my commitment to practicing is based on a conclusion about Buddhism, about practice.
Yes.
I'm not sure what to do about that conclusion, or how to receive the conclusions about Buddhism and practice.
Not just, as long as you know it's a conclusion. You don't, they're functioning differently. Just be aware that it's a conclusion. I have a conclusion that I agreed to years ago when I received vows. That's to save all beings, even though there aren't any. There are no beings. It's empty of other. But people in the world are suffering, and so you have to meet people where they're at in the suffering if you're going to help anyone. So, I don't even need to know what your conclusions about Buddhism are. I have a lot of them. So but it's only about being aware of it. When I say don't conclude, mainly what I'm talking about is the little areas, not the mundane ones where we conclude it's time to take the garbage out, but when we're coming to kind of opinions about things and judgments. I think a lot of it's just being aware of it rather than trying to stop something or start something. So when I say don't conclude, it's just to get a conversation or have something to talk about as far as the Dharma talk. And it would be different with each person. Just like some people could practice Tonglen. Some people probably should just be doing a simple mindfulness practice. Other people need to be doing Shikantaza. If I teach someone Shikantaza and talk to them a little bit about it, I have an idea fairly quickly if I should modify that practice, change it in some way. Usually I don't. Usually I think Shikantaza, the wonderful thing about Shikantaza is you sit down, hold still, and just watch and just observe. Then it finds its own area. You actually, when I say watch what moves, you might find yourself watching your breath quite a long time, maybe for days, but it's still something that's moving. The maintenance part of it is the thing I would take a little exception to. And same thing with conclusion. The maintenance part of the conclusion, you look more closely at that rather than trying to get rid of the conclusion. More?
Jen Bowing, I also wanted to ask about, you gave me the book I Am by Jean Klein, and he says, a student asks, how do I see through illusion? And he says, inspection.
He said what?
Inspection. I think loosely, if I'm remembering, he just said inspecting is how you see through illusion. And I wonder.
Yes, I agree.
Is there another way besides watching what moves, or is that the inspection?
That's the inspection. And that's Jean Klein as you know, is a Advaita, a non-dual teacher that passed away some years ago. Amazing teaching. The Advaita, just like the other teachers, especially in India, are onto that idea of non-duality of things being an illusion. That shows up not just with the Buddha, but all over the place in different ways with different modifications of it. But yes, I like that Jean Klein's book very much and what he has to say. Also, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramana Maharshi, are teachers all over the place that I've been looking at for many years. And that helped me see it from a little bit different perspectives, but it's still, if not the same teaching, it's very, very similar. It's just that 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught this in a certain way, and it created the 18 schools that took off, and here we are. We're still looking at this using that image, using these robes to do this. Yes, go ahead, Jen.
Question, Jen Bowing. Back to the conclusions about practice. I fear that I'm shutting down on something with this conclusion.
What's the conclusion?
That it feels like a crutch. This feels correct or true or the right path.
Well, I feel like it's the right path too. So, and I would say there's probably a lot of other people here who would say this looks like the thing I should be doing, but it may not be right for everyone. But for you or for me, this is the right thing for me to be doing. I don't have an alternate. There isn't anything else showing up that is in competition with this path. So I follow. I think a little bit what you're asking about, but I would say it won't last. Whatever you're doing right now, if you do nothing with it, will come apart, including the conclusion. Even the vow comes apart. Everything falls apart. Everything. Anything that shows up comes apart.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
No Kabbalah questions on YouTube. Asks, sometimes you say be the shit you're trying to get rid of. This might work with fear, but not with procrastination. Can you please help with that? Thank you.
Well, there might be, the idea here, Ath, is what I'm trying to emphasize is to be aware of the difficulty you're having rather than try to come up with solutions or ways to work with it or stop it or start it or cover up or passion, aggression, ignorance, whatever it may be, is to try to feel the texture of that. So when you have the procrastination situation, and I'm just going to run this up, this is not a standard. I'm not saying everyone with procrastination should do this, but you might want to move it into your right into the thinking process, right into the intellect, and actually write down what you're procrastinating. I procrastinate about this, and actually get it into the thinking process in a tighter form, so you can legal pad or something, and then look at that, contemplate that, get yourself as close as you can to the structures around procrastination that you can convert into concepts, so that you may back out of the concepts that you've just written down back into that. What the texture is of that procrastination may get you a little closer to the area of what it is you are avoiding, because it's a kind of avoidance. So I would say, and the other thing I'm saying, it kind of goes without saying, if you're listening to me and you're not meditating, then let's start with that. Let's start with sit down, hold still, spend a lot of time wall gazing. Look at minimum, I would say minimum. Even this, I hesitate to say this because I don't know what it's like to be you. Maybe 20 minutes facing a wall 3 times a week is all you can do. But I would say if you can, try to meditate every day for an hour or so. And if it's totally impossible, if you're having trouble with that and you're all locked up in your thinking process, then I would forget what I just said about writing things down. And I would say sit a lot. I would say don't ask me another question until you can come back and say I sat an hour a day for the last 2 weeks. Come back and say, tell me that first before you ask me the question. Then I'll have a better idea of who I'm talking to. You won't have any better idea of who you're talking to, and you won't have any idea of who you're listening to. Not so bad, not a bad situation to be aware of. It's not a conclusion. Awareness is not a conclusion. If it's a conclusion, then it's thoughts about stuff and it's concepts, and the concepts are obstructing your clarity about what this is. Thank you so much. I think we can go elsewhere now. Appreciate all of your questions. Appreciate your patience and with the slow process of whatever we're doing.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro San Shi Shifu Shi Son Bu Sa Mo Ko Sa Mo Ko the 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Thank you, Sokuzan.